Ryan Goodman is with me now, legal analyst here out front and former special counsel at the Department of Defense. So, Ryan, you just heard Senator Gallego saying one or more of there needs to go. I mean, Walz is the one who invited the reporter into the group. Hegseth is the one who posted the targets and weapons used to target. Obviously, at this moment, it doesn't seem like anyone's going to resign. We'll see. But, I mean, when we say an extraordinary breach, is that the right word?
Absolutely. Don't know of any analog in history that's like this. And when these kinds of war plans are discussed at the Pentagon, there are many rooms that you can't even have the discussion in the Pentagon. You have to go to highly secure rooms. Oftentimes they're windowless because they need to be that secure from U.S. adversaries being able to eavesdrop. If there's a window, then it has to be a highly secured window. You can't bring your device into that room. So they aren't even just like bringing their device into the room. They're using their personal devices to communicate over this commercial messaging app. I've never heard anything like it.
So could anyone in it be in legal trouble? Anyone who was in this group, if they are not in actual chain of command getting fired or resigning trouble?
Absolutely. If we had an independent Justice Department, I'm sure they'd be looking into this. If these were lower level officials, I'm sure they'd be looking into this. The statute is actually one that many Americans can be familiar with. It's the Espionage Act, and there's a particular
Gallego said
provision.
he'd be court-martialed if he'd
That resonated with me when he said that. I was like, yes, that's very likely. That would have been the result. Or when Hillary Clinton used a private server, the investigation by the Justice Department and the FBI was whether or not she was grossly negligent. I think if you hear some of what the members of the Hill are saying, Republicans and Democrats alike, that this was grossly negligent. And that's actually the terms of the criminal statute for having gross negligence in mishandling classified information. And in fact, if it's disclosed to somebody who's unauthorized, and on their call is a journalist, that means there was in fact a disclosure.
Right, right. And of course, Secretary of Defense's response was to deny what he did and to disparage the journalist.
Yeah. Let's talk about the story that has exploded over the last 24 hours. Jeffrey Goldberg in The Atlantic writing about this signal group text chain he was invited to discussing war plans, attack plans on Yemen. There have been people suggesting that a law could have been broken here, Ellie. What law is in play, and what are the right questions to ask pertaining that law?
So there is a federal law that people often look at in situations like this, and it's a rare one because it actually does not require intentionality. Most of our criminal laws require some intentional violation of the law. This one actually applies to gross negligence. What it says, it's section 793, if anyone wants to look it up, but it says that it is a crime to remove sensitive information from its proper place of custody grossly negligently. So I think in terms of the question you asked, what else would we need to know? First of all, is this information sensitive enough that it qualifies? It certainly seems the answer there is yes. It seems this information related to a planned military strike. Second of all, was it removed from or kept outside of its proper place of custody? Signal chat, I'm not a super expert on this, but seems to me to be not the place where this information is supposed to be stored. And then the trickiest question is, was it grossly negligent of the players to do this? And I want to be clear, the gross negligence part wouldn't necessarily be the inadvertently inviting Jeffrey Goldberg, the journalist, into this. I mean, that certainly would be one of the aspects of it. But I think the real question about negligence is just maintaining this signal chat among top U.S. officials. Would that itself be grossly negligent? So there's a lot of facts we still need to know, but that's the law that people usually look at in situations like this.
You know, to get those answers, someone would have to investigate. Who would be the body investigating here?
Well, that could be the big catch-22 here. Ordinarily, the Justice Department would take a look at this. There's a National Security Division. I think there's a 0% chance Pam Bondi authorizes an investigation, a criminal investigation of this case. You then look to Congress. You saw Lauren Fox reporting in the last segment about how that might go. I mean, the Republicans control both houses. They certainly have the authority to launch a robust investigation. They have subpoena power, but that's the Republican Party. They're the majority now. There's really not a whole heck of a lot the Democrats can do as the minority party. For example, they can't issue subpoenas, for the most part, as the minority party. So I think that's the big question. Who's going to be in position to meaningfully dig down and investigate this? I certainly would not look at the Justice Department, given what we know already about leadership there.
Joining me now to talk about all of this is CNN military analyst and retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton and Sabrina Singh, a former Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary. I'm going to start with you, Colonel. All right, every Republican we just heard Manu Raju talk to said this was a mistake. It was a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. So, Colonel, if you were still serving and you were responsible for an intelligence leak like this, could this also be a crime or at least something to be court-martialed over?
Yes, absolutely, Sarah. Good morning. There is a very clear provision within the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, as well as under the Espionage Act. So in those particular cases, if I were to do something like that, I would have not only been, lost my job, I would have been court-martialed probably, or at the very least disciplined in such a way that I probably would have had to leave the service, or at least potentially be reduced in rank. There's even the potential for prison time for this kind of thing. So careless behavior like this does create a lot of problems, and it certainly does create problems for those who serve in the military if they engage in behavior that is as careless as this.
Yeah, so you're sort of saying the way the military would see this is not just as a mistake, but as something that should never have been able to happen in the first place. Let me ask you this. In your estimation, when you look at all the things that happened, who was on the chat, how the reporter was added, should heads roll over this obvious intelligence breach?
I think absolutely there has to be accountability. And you're not just talking about some government employees. You're talking about the entire national security apparatus, from senior cabinet officials, including the Secretary of State and Secretary Hegseth, being on this chat, talking about classified details on an unclassified text app. And, I know there's a lot of focus on Mike Walls right now, but I think it's important to remember that it is Secretary of Defense Hegseth who allegedly shared details of an ongoing operation in the chat, including, leadership names of who was going to be targeted, the timing and the locations. If any adversary had intercepted these text messages, we have fighters up in the air that were about to conduct those operations. Their lives are absolutely put at risk with messages like this being disclosed in an unclassified setting. So absolutely, not only should there be accountability, there should be hearings looking into what exactly happened here so this doesn't ever happen again.
We will see whether or not that happens with Republicans having control of both houses. I do want to ask you, Colonel Layton, how is this supposed to work? How are plans like this supposed to be shared?
Yeah, Sarah, that always happens in a very secure space. And basically what you're looking at is a secure room known as a SCIF, a secure compartmented information facility. That is the area where these things are supposed to happen in face-to-face meetings. In terms of communications, there are classified systems. On the secret side, the SIPRNet is what it's called. On the even higher classification side, there's a system known as JWICS, in which these kinds of discussions take place. And any type of contingency operation plan, any of those kinds of things would have to be conducted on what they call the high side, which is one of those two systems. And in this particular case, all of those discussions should have been held on those particular systems and not on a commercially available encrypted app like Signal.
So Rita, saying to you now, Hegseth has said, publicly, oh, there were no war plans leaked, when literally the reporter who was on this particular chat shows that there were war plans leaked. And Hegseth is doubling down and not only doing so, but attacking the reporter who didn't ask to be on the chain, but was added to the chain. What do you make of the way that Hegseth himself is trying to spin this?
I think it's exactly that. They're going to try and spin this. They're going to try and throw, they're going to try and throw insults at this reporter. The reality is the Signal thread was set up. The reporter was added. Obviously, that was a reckless way of not only just conducting a normal business, but to add a reporter and no one on the chat even checking who was on it. But I think the larger question here as well is this is clearly not the first time. The fact that the reporter did get added to this thread, how many more threads are there like this out there? And so, for Hegseth to go out there and deny and try and, denigrate this reporter, the reality is that the NSC stood by these text messages and said they are authentic. So I think right now what really needs to happen is there needs to be an investigation into this. Certainly if it were any other government employee, they would immediately be put on leave. The Department of Defense would have opened up an investigation. And I think no doubt you would have heard more Republicans in Congress calling for that person to be removed from their position.
Colonel Cedric Layton, Sabrina Singh, thank you both so much. Really appreciate you.